Hello and welcome to another episode of Coffee with Matt, where I pour a cup of coffee and interview an artist, a creative, or a professional on their work and their creative process. Today I'm very excited because I am interviewing a longtime friend, mentor, and author, Patricia Eagle. Patricia wrote her first dog's love story at age 10 and published her first book at age 67. Her creative process and mental health equilibrium have long involved having a hand or foot on one of her dogs. Her spring 2025 memoir, Dog Love Stories, explores how becoming a companion to dogs has taught her to be a better human. She attempts to weave meaning into story in ways that acknowledge our life paths. Her 2019 memoir, Being Mean, a memoir of sexual abuse and survival, proved to be an in-depth self-exploratory process. The book was a finalist with the 2019 Forward Indies National Book Awards, the 2019 Authors League Literary Awards, the 2020 Chanticleer International Book Awards in Overcoming Adversity in Memoir, and placed third in memoirs with the 2020 Colorado Independent Publishing Association Awards. Although Patricia struggled in high school English and was never a teacher's favorite, she has undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Texas, Austin, and the University of Houston, Clear Lake. Her teaching experiences range from water baby classes, high school French and English, to graduate classes in teacher education. She lives with her spouse and dog Mercy in South Central Colorado in an old house with peeling paint and a shifting foundation. And now, here's our interview. In the manuscript, you kind of give a description of making of the dog cemetery at Graceland, which is your land in Alamosa, Colorado. But kind of, what was the culmination of that idea to have a dog cemetery there? And then also, what inspired Dog Love Stories?
Well, they came together. And by the way, that land is really in Blanca, Colorado, which is about 30, 40 miles east of Alamosa. So it was a pandemic. And meeting friends up at our land, Graceland, and we'd want to sit in the summer, we'd want to sit in the shade. And we had that big sweeping pinon off to the east of where the big view is. And Bill and I had buried Gavroche there years before, not thinking that we would be sitting there. I mean, we'd sit there, but the thing was, the pandemic, what it had to do with the pandemic is we had to sit 6 feet apart at the beginning, where we were afraid we were going to contaminate each other.
Right.
So we'd get our chairs, and it's like Gavroche's grave. We'd buried him under this wonderful pinon tree. And Gavroche's grave was right in the middle. And I would be like, damn it, you're in the middle. The good thing was he had a gravestone, and, of course, I would always want to sit close enough I could prop up my feet on his gravestone. I liked that. But we had put rocks on top of his grave, so those rocks were cumbersome to navigate. The rocks were on top of his grave to deter coyotes. So, and then we'd want to move a table over there, or several tables, so we could sit 6 feet apart and have our meals. And we would be singing sometimes, and so we had to stay 6 feet apart while we're singing. We'd be outside. Seems so strange to think how we were right at first. We just didn't know what was going on.
Right.
Washing our mail.
Right, yeah. Sanitizing the groceries.
Sanitizing the groceries. So one day I thought, we gotta move him. And I stood and looked around, and being the Rocky Mountains, and we're on a mountainside that's very rocky, I thought, well, where could we move him? Because it was hard enough to dig a grave there with the tree roots. Mm-hmm. Then I looked over in an area where the prairie dogs had built homes, and the soil was just real nice and soft, and I thought, well, we can move him over there. And I stood there looking at it, and I thought, wonder if I could move my other dog that I'd buried because it was winter outside of Alamoso, could move her up here too. And then I was standing there looking at it, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a dog graveyard? I don't have the remains of all my dogs, but I could put up a gravestone for every dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept going in that direction. And I thought, and I don't need to actually move the dogs, Amber and Gavroche. They can stay where they are. I'll just move their headstone. What do you call it? Amber's is wooden, and Gavroche's is a stone, beautiful stone. I thought I'll just move their gravestones into this cemetery. And I stood there and looked at it, and I had this picture of where a lot of my ancestors are buried in Marysville, Texas. And they have these little individual, within the big cemetery are these little individual cemeteries where 2 to 6 gravestones and burial plots are. And I thought, well, we could build a little fence around it. And I saw it. I just saw it as clear as day. And so I told Bill about it. And he was, Bill, pretty amenable to anything. But he was like, let's do it. So we gathered up supplies. We gathered up old fencing that had been here. I mean, it's really old fencing, over 100 years old, nice fencing. And then I started finding gravestones that I could ride on my hikes, and I'd put them to the side of the road, carry them as far as I could. That was back when I could. And then I'd drive the Blazer to where they were and pick them up and brought them back. And neither of us are like really handy people with our hands, so we made do. We got it. We got posts in. We put concrete in the holes. We dug post holes and put the posts in, and then wrapped as much of the fencing around it as we could, and then we made do with other stuff because we didn't have enough to go all the way around. The biggest challenge was making a gate. And it's pretty funny, but it fits. You sort of have to kick it, but it fits. And since unexpectedly one of my dogs died in February 28th, and thankfully we had dug a hole in the fall when the ground was not frozen. We now actually have one dog buried up there. And then the other 8 gravestones are symbolic. And goodness is there. And burying her in the cemetery was just such a precious thing that she has that holy ground to be in.
Yeah, I will say when you took me up there last time I visited, it is really powerful to be there. And then when you invited me to make the, I don't know what it would be, a memorial flag? Maybe?
Prayer flag.
A prayer flag.
Yeah, for that dog.
And I was able to make one for Abeja and Oso, which were my 2 dogs. Abeja was when I was in high school to college, and then Oso was high school all the way till I was like 27 when I moved back to Denver. And just taking a moment to just acknowledge them and add them to that space for other people's dogs too, and the other prayer flags, was really powerful. And I can see the tie-in of like what dog love stories is. It's like taking time to really acknowledge this powerful and emotional relationship that we have with our dogs as dog lovers. Not everyone, but as dog lovers. I'm usually inclusive, but you know what? We're dog people, and let's embrace that.
We've been born into the world of dogs, is what I say. That's right. It's creatures loving other creatures. Yeah. What does beja mean?
Bee, abeja. It's bee in Spanish.
Oh, abeja. Mm-hmm. And oso?
Bear.
Oh, I knew that.
Yeah.
Nice names.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a nice way for us to kind of reconnect to our Latinidad, to name them Spanish names, and just keep that Mexican connection strong.
Absolutely. So, abeja is to be.
Oh, like a bumblebee, like a bee.
Oh, okay.
Bee and bear.
Bee and bear. Oh, I'm glad you made prayer flags for him. You may have to make them again. The winds were so strong this winter. I had to take them down, move them in. I'm going to try to repair them, but the winds tried to beat everything up. But that's what's supposed to happen with prayer flags.
Mm-hmm.
The prayer releases.
Right.
I really loved doing that idea, having people make flags so that their dogs could be honored too, not just our dogs, or cats, or horse, or guinea pig. Really, just their creature.
Yeah.
And I'll keep doing that and let those flags just get blown to threads.
Yeah. All things temporary.
Yep. Now the rocks probably won't get blown to threads. They're fine. They're intact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So working on dog love stories, what's that process been like for you in terms of grief?
When I started Dog Love Stories, I felt, and I also heard this in response from a lot of people, they were like, oh, well, that'll be a lot easier than writing my other book, Being Mean, a memoir of sexual abuse and survival. And I went, yeah, right, I'm glad that'll be easier. Well, well, since they die, it was like, oh, great, I have to write about every dog's death.
One after another.
One after the other. That's what I was talking about this morning. And remember that each dog's death. I had not written about all their deaths. I had probably journaled, since I have many decades of journals that I don't go through, because one, I'd have to find it, and they're not organized, and then I'd have to find that day, that year.
That dog.
That dog, yeah. But what I've learned, this apart from your question, is that one of the things about journaling, what it does is it really helps with your memory. Even if you don't go back and reread something, which certainly, that'll help with your memory, but the process of writing is more than just the process of experiencing. So, you live something and experience it, then you write about it, and then when you come to that place of remembering it, it's a little more accessible because you've written about it, even if you wrote about it decades ago.
Right.
So it was it was both a hot, cold experience, joyful, painful. Joyful to remember that dog and our life, what we shared of life together. Painful to remember the challenges that I may have had with that dog, from any accidents they were in to, of course, their deaths. And I, as I wrote about their deaths, I got right back into that space, which is what happens. It's what happens with powerful reading. And one thing that I know is if I don't write into the raw experience, of what I lived, then the reader will not read and experience the power of what I'm writing about. If my writing doesn't bring me to tears, it certainly isn't going to bring tears to the eyes of a reader. So I have to challenge myself to go into that painful, painful place of, with each dog, of holding a dog that's dying as I race to the vet, a dog that's been hit by a car, or holding a dog that's dying as the vet injects a shot of euthanasia. And I have to let myself be fully present to how hard that was, how intense the experience. Hard, but the thing is, that's like a full-hearted experience. I have to go into it and let my heart just feel all the pain that I felt at that point. So I feel tears because I just, I have those different dogs that I can think of, and one that was not that long ago, as I held her and sang to her as the vet gave her the shots. And I'm so glad to have been with my dogs when I was able to, as they died. And I'm so glad to write about it, because that helps. It's just a lifelong healing experience. I never stop loving people or dogs that have died.
Yeah. No, and both with Being Mean and Dog Love Stories, there's so much about just loving people and looking for love, and the love that dogs give us. And it's just so unconditional, the ones that pets give us.
Ain't that the truth?
I intentionally read the chapter on Dancer because I've been fortunate enough to... I met Pookie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, you did.
When you were at, I forget what street, but it was like East Denver.
Ivanhoe, I called it.
Yeah,
it was really Ivanhoe.
Right, Ivanhoe, yeah.
Because it was next to the Colfax where all the prostitutes were, so I called it Ivanhoe.
Right. And then Gavroche and Amber, Goodness, and El Mercy.
You've known half of them.
Yeah. And so I intentionally was like, I want to read about a dog I haven't met, so that way I don't have the image in my head. And the writing could really come across. So that way I'm not like, cheating, And kind of what we were talking about before we started the recording, what's something about Dancer that you miss, or some of the things that she would do that you kind of think of when you think of Dancer?
Well, very specific things. And because you said something earlier that I don't want to forget and I do want to respond to, I think I can tie it into Dancer. But I'm just going to go right to that. When you talked about dogs loving us unconditionally, and they do have that unconditional love, like they don't care what we look like. We don't have to get, brush our hair, get ready for them. They love us. Or if we feel lousy, they usually love us anyway, stuff like that. But we have a responsibility as dog companions, guardians, owners. I sort of like to think of being a dog guardian and companion. We have a responsibility with that unconditional love to hold it with care, to take it with care, to take that responsibility, in how we take care of them. d- dancer. She taught me at some difficult. She was at a transitional time in my life during a divorce, and going off and living in a scuzzy apartment. And as I got it together and teaching in a inner city Houston school that had its challenges, and I was anxious and challenged and lonesome, and I have had challenges with mental health, so I had mental health challenges of trying to stay balanced and still take care of myself and pay bills, and get groceries, kind of stuff. And she was still. She would just be, unlike Pookie, who was just always had this energy, all over the place. Dancer was just still. So it was just like she would get me to just be still. And I would just pet her. And my breath would still. And she had that. She offered me that. And by coming and just sitting right by me, and my hand would find its way to her, and she would just sit there, and I could feel my blood pressure just go down and my breathing calm. It was a huge gift to me. And when she died, she had a stroke, and I came home from work one day, and she was in a corner, looking in a corner, which apparently dogs do when they have a stroke. Maybe humans do too. I really don't know. And I found out, got her to the vet, and found out that she had had a stroke, and she very likely had a brain tumor or something like that. I don't know, because that's thousands of dollars to do that kind of testing and treatment, and that's not something I've done with my dogs. Probably because I've been limited by income. Mm-hmm. But even after she'd had that stroke, she tried her best to. These are hard conversations. She tried her best to just be there. She could barely wag her tail or stand up, but she was there. She just. Of course, she was more still because she'd had a stroke, but she'd always been that way. And when she died, with a shot at the vets of euthanasia, she was still. She just stayed still. The vet said, all kinds of things can happen. The dog may move and get real restless and do all this stuff, but no. Her breath went out, and she was just still. That was before they did the tranquilizing shot and then the euthanasia shot. So there were other gifts, but that's one that popped into mind when you asked me the question. I cry a lot, and it's, I hope I never don't, because I feel like tears are as important as laughter. Mm. And I cry a lot about my dogs, because my dogs have touched me as much as my human relationships have. Mm. My dogs have saved me. I actually would not be alive if I had not had a dog at different times in my life, because I was suicidal. And I needed to take care of my dogs. And it was kept me tethered to being alive.
I cry a lot too. And I have thought about this, that, people are like, you're so sensitive. And that word, I think some people have the connotation that means weak, right?
Yeah.
And to me, being sensitive is like a Geiger counter. It's like, I will tell you if there's a radiation in a rock. I can sense things that you can't see. And it's helped me in my storytelling with filmmaking or podcasting, that I can feel when the story is like, oh, this is really powerful. And I've come to appreciate my sensitivity as almost a superpower when it comes to storytelling.
I like that.
Yeah, so if you think a Geiger counter's weak, then yeah, I'm weak, but I don't think so. This thing could save you.
That is so great.
Yeah.
I grew up, my mother used to, in anger, used to say, quit being so sensitive. And I thought something was wrong with it. I felt too much. But you're right. Later in life, I realized that it really, I saw it as a superpower. That it's helped me to the degree that I felt sadness and grief and despair, that I've been willing to feel that, I am able to feel joy and exuberance and hope. So they come hand in hand, as apparently it does for you. That's why I love you so much.
I love you too. Yeah, I think too, embracing it, and I think a big part of my drinking was trying to control my intense feelings towards positive and negative emotions, that they're just so overwhelming for me. That I think that was a part of drinking, was trying to limit how overwhelming they are.
That's what I've heard. Yeah. I could say that about being busy too.
Ooh, yeah. No,
That
a busybody.
Yeah, that my propensity to overschedule, be hyperactive, not so much now, although I've had a few people say I'm still that way. I like to do a lot of things, but when I would be busy, it really kept me from feeling.
One part that sticks out for Dancer is it's like a scene where you and Bill are driving, and Dancer's breath smells of fish from like being in a lake, and Bill's like, is the dog coming on our next road trip? And then you find a goat farm to keep Dancer at, and in it there's kind of this scene where, I'll just read it. So, you've taken her to the goat farm, and Dancer stood on her hind legs, front paws on the fence, frantically barking and whining as they drove off. Where are you going? Why am I here? Who is this woman? Who are these other dogs? Is this another shelter? Are you coming back? I thought you loved me. And I've wondered about that every time I've had to leave a dog, or if they've had to go into the vet. Or I've wondered, like, when they get into an elevator or the subway, like, do they know what this is? Do they know that we're gonna come back? And yeah, it must be very difficult for dogs to have so much emotion and love without the rationality of, oh, I'm just at the shelter for a week, or, I can't actually fathom how difficult that must be.
It's not like, okay, I'm going to be here 4 days.
Right.
They don't
We can talk ourselves down, like,
it's like, this is it. Right. Where am I? Wouldn't that be awful? Yeah. To not know?
Yeah. And especially if they're just like in a state of now, they're just like refresh every couple minutes of like, nope, they're not here. All right, go back, and nope, not here.
And there were a lot of lessons in that situation. She didn't have fish breath. She had wallered in the fish.
Oh.
Her whole body was stinky dead fish.
Oh, okay. I might have been thinking of the diaper factoid then, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's right. She used to her favorite snack was dirty diapers.
Right.
That was I've thought about that experience because it was I learned to think much more, do much more, be more thorough where I left dogs after that. Doesn't mean I didn't ever make any other mistakes. I made plenty, but I mean, Dancer was only my second dog, third. She was my third dog, and I got her in my early 30s. But I had taken her that I had a friend who had a goat farm, so I could leave her there, and she was going to put her out where she kept her goat herding dogs. And I went and checked out the kennels, and I thought, they were clean, looked good. Well, I don't know why, I just didn't think deeply enough about it to think what it would be like at night for her. I mean, there was shelter. She had a little thing she could get under in the rain, or it was shady. But there were coyotes howling, owls hooting, and the other dogs barking. And I had gotten Dancer from a shelter, so she had that probably, and still had the shelter memory. I mean, it hadn't been that long that I'd had her. And she didn't know this woman. And the woman was a farmer, and a lot of farmers don't think real highly of dogs. They use them. They're maybe nice to them, but they don't really care about that much. They're not affectionate. So Dancer was just left there all day, and somebody fed her, probably a ranch farm hand. And when I went and picked her up after 4 or 5 days of us being gone, she got hives, horrible hives, before I got home. She was so excited to see me. She heard my car coming in. She was so excited to see me that the hives closed her eyes. Her body was just hives. And I called the vet, this of course before cell phones. Got home, called the vet. Vet said, just calm her down, use Benadryl, give her a little Benadryl, just put a cold cloth over her body. And I don't remember how long it took before the hives went down, but they did. And of course, I made promises to her. No, I didn't do that again. It was a tough experience for her mostly, and then also for me. But I learned.
Writing about this, what's your feeling about dogs recognizing death? Because we know we're going to die. We know our dogs are going to die. Do you think dogs know that they're going to die?
I think that dogs, first of all, I am not an expert. I'm only an expert on my dogs, and even then there's a lot I don't know.
Yeah.
So in my experience, I have had dogs like Goodness, who just died, and Pookie, both Goodness and Pookie, went out here in Colorado in 0-degree temperatures at night and wouldn't come in when they were close to death, when they were ill. And I made them come in. And then I scheduled their shots, euthanasia. But I believe that each dog was ready to die. So in whatever way they could know that they were ill. An awareness of their own death, I don't know. Just that, I don't even know if I can say a willingness. It feels like, I want to say a willingness to go ahead and die. And then with dogs, with other dogs, I have had dogs who were very close to each other, who had spent years together, decade together. When one of them died, grieve that dog's absence. I don't know if they really understood death, although I have a practice with my dogs of when I'm able to let them be around their dog companion who has died, before I bury that dog. And that's been very powerful. I've seen my dogs whine, circle that dog. Pookie, when Dancer died, Pookie, it took her about 4 months before she wanted to re-engage with me. And see, I'd gotten Pookie as a puppy and Dancer was an adult. And I'd never really recognized that Pookie was more Dancer's dog than my dog. I mean, they spent 24 hours a day together. And so Pookie had grown up with Dancer, and Dancer died, and it was really much harder for her than me, even though it was still very hard for me. But she lost her energy. She was only 4, but she didn't know. Pookie was. Dancer was 11 or 12. But Pookie backed off. She didn't want me to pet her. She didn't want me to nuzzle her like I had used to do. And if I went to hug her, she'd turn her head. And so I had to give her a space. I, of course, still walked her and cared for her if she didn't want to chase balls. Now, for a lab to not want to chase balls at 4 years old is a big deal. I believe dogs do grieve. It depends on the dog. It depends on the relationship that dog had. And, you know, there's a lot of factors. It depends on how the dog guardian facilitates the dogs to their companionship together. But I know dogs feel emotions. I mean, you just have to look at their faces, you know. They smile, they look downcast. You know, when you're leaving, you do not see a smile on their face when you're packing a bag. I mean, it's like you see the
No, they're like,
face.
Where are you going?
Yeah, like, not again. I know what this means.
Oh no, all the stuff is by the door.
Yeah.
I see them pacing. They're looking for keys and
Yeah,
jackets.
they're a little anxious. Or, yeah. So, yeah.
I know. I saw like every couple of years a news article comes out that's like, scientists find out dogs can tell when we're stressed. And it's like, how many millions of dollars did you spend to find that out?
Much.
It's like, yeah. They can sense like they can read our expressions. They can like, I think they could even hear our heartbeats on some level if we're really stressed out, you know?
Or they can hear our voices. I
think they could smell it too if you're like stressed out and sweating.
Yeah, they do.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. When Bill and I went through a difficult time in our lives, you know, externally and internally and between us, and we would raise our voices at each other. One of the things that helped us do a reset was we'd hear the dog door, flap, 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 flap. Amber and Gavroche, boom, they were like gone. We're out of here. I mean, we didn't throw anything at each other or whatever, just raising our voices. Boom, they were out.
They're like, you know what, the vibe's off in here. You work this out. We're out of here.
Yeah. They know. They know. They feel us.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate your writings, because when I had to put down Oso, it was nice as a family. We decided to give him one last summer. It was like the fall before, and we decided to just give him one last summer. But he was going to be 16. He was an old dog.
He was an old dog. What kind of dog was he?
He was a border collie.
Oh, high energy dog.
Yeah, and you know, near the end was in a lot of pain, so got him some medication, some CBD, but it was really sweet for us as a family to just kind of talk about it and kind of agree. And summer's such a beautiful, warm time, and just agree that we'll give Osa one last summer. And then I felt responsible to be the one that took him to the vet to be put down. And that feeling of taking him was really hard, to be knowing that we're going there together, but I would be the only one leaving. But it was for the better, because he was in so much pain and his vision was starting to go. And just reading these stories, like, yeah, allowed me to kind of think back about my times with Abeja and Oso, and just give like time to those moments with them.
Mm-hmm. It's just respectful.
Yeah. And now every time I drive by that, like, I don't know what it is. It's like a shelter vet place. It's like off of, I don't know, I-70, kind of towards the mountains. But every time I go by it, it's like that memory of that day is really vibrant. I just think about it.
Mm-hmm. May it stay that way.
Yeah.
Actually, because that's what I call sort of polishing a memory. Makes it even more cherished.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just painful, it's also you remember. It's just a poignant time to say goodbye to a creature that you've loved. Mm-hmm. And it's a part of life, a big part of life to do that. It'll prepare you for another dog or person that you say goodbye to. I mean, I'm sure it's easier now to drive by there than when you first put Oso down, but to still let yourself remember, I just think it's precious. Even the tough memories can be ones when we can look back and go, that was so hard, but I don't want to ever forget. I don't want to ever forget all the life in that dog and even that last experience with them.
Yeah, and afterwards, my family, thanked me for putting him down, and we talked about his memories. But similar to how we talked about when you tell people that your dog passed away, the responses that people give, some of them are really like not helpful, and some of them are hurtful. So, yeah, what would you say to people on maybe how to respond better? Or what are some of your pet peeves, no pun intended, about people's responses?
I wonder how that can pet peeves.
It's a good question.
That's it.
We should look it up before we go. Maybe that could be the intro.
Well, I do have some, and I'm writing a blog about them. It was very challenging for me. I have several. When I told people that Goodness died, I had several people, their immediate response was to start talking about when their dog died. And I wasn't in a place to hear about their dog's death from years ago. Obviously, they needed to talk about it, but my dog just died, and I wanted someone to just listen. What I wanted was someone to say, not necessarily, I'm so sorry for your loss, because I think that's sort of trite now, but it still acknowledges a death, which is important, and I'll give it that.
Right.
But I'm so sorry to hear about Goodness. Would you like to share about that? Share with me about that experience. And if I don't want to talk about her death, I can go, well, not really. Okay, well, do you want to talk about anything you miss about her? I mean, I wanted to talk about how she died. I wanted to talk about, that's what helped me go through my grief. I definitely wanted to talk about what I missed about her. I wanted to, because that's what brought a smile to my face. The things she did that made Bill and me laugh, and that we were already feeling a gaping hole without her being around with her suck bone that she would grab and hold so tenderly and start sucking until she went to sleep. I did not want to hear at all about other people's dogs' death. At one point, with one person, I had to tell her, I need to get off the phone now. I just couldn't do it. I had to honor where I was and say, I'm sorry, I can't continue this conversation. I need to get off, but we'll talk again another time. As it was difficult when, with Goodness, and it reminded me of what had happened with my dog Gavroche. Gavroche died at 16 years old. He was 17. I'd had him 16 years. Goodness was 10-ish. I don't know. Both of them are shelter dogs. I don't know their exact ages. Goodness died at 3.5 years old. It's one person who said, oh, I'm so glad you didn't have her that long. As one person said with Gavroche, well, at least you had him for 16 years. Like that made it easier. Or it made it easier with Goodness. I only had her 3.5 years. I just looked at these people like, he doesn't, the linear time makes my heart doesn't measure in linear time. I can feel love for a person within days, or a dog. That was not relevant. And I don't understand. But once again, I just would sort of ease out of those conversations with people because I couldn't. I knew we had a disconnect. Another thing were the people that didn't say anything, but they knew. There was no acknowledgement.
That's my least favorite.
Yeah, it's like, well, either they're afraid of the D word, death, which I like the word death. In fact, I'd rather say it than passed away or passed. And as a home funeral guide, we actually confront that because it helps people hold the experience. What really happened is death. There's nothing evil, bad about the word death. Oh, I'm sorry your dog died. But the people that didn't say anything that knew, and I knew they knew, and it was like, whoa, this really hurts. And there were times where I said, I'm really having a hard time right now with my dog's death. And then, and as a full-fledged, born into the world of dogs, dog lover person, there were also those situations where weeks had passed, or even now, I think it's been 6 weeks. Well, and let me do the math from February 28th. Maybe it's been longer than that. But I still like it when people go, how you doing with Goodness's death? Or how is it not having Goodness around? I still like talking about her. I don't cry as much, but it takes a while. It takes a while to get through loss and work through the grief. Even if it's a dog or a cat or a horse, or whatever it is, a bird, there's a gaping hole in your life. We had 4 creatures living in this house, Bill, me, Goodness, and Mercy. And when one of them wasn't here, it was much quieter. It just was not right. It was off balance. We kept thinking we were about to see her walk around the corner or that I just saw her little butt go around a corner. You know, I honestly would think I had just seen her walk into another room. I mean, her presence was pervasive, and we miss her. We miss her deeply. So acknowledging that grief. Those are a few things that I experienced. People that sent cards, that was really, really nice. And it also added to, I do a little altar when a human or a dog dies. And you know, we found dog bones everywhere because goodness was a bone collector. And so I put her bones out, and her little stuffed piggy, and a picture, and her obituary that I'd written, which is really helpful to write an obit, and then to put the cards that people had sent me. A few people did. And it was nice. The vet sent a card. That meant something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, just the culture around death to begin with is one of avoidance
It
and
is.
being uncomfortable.
Yep.
So then once it gets to a dog's death, it's even more awkward and distant. And, you know, I'm a product of the Western world. Thank you, Western world, for recordings and phones and the advancements in technology. But there are several places that I feel like we've really left ourselves just like hanging out there in the wind. And it's our relationship to death, our relationship to aging, our relationship to sex. It's like all these things that are
Don't talk about that.
Yeah, and it's like, you couldn't give us some of these things.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, just really just acknowledging and not being afraid of it. And one of the more comical things that has happened to me is like, we're so uncomfortable that even at funerals, people go like, "How are you doing?" And people go, "I'm good." Well, you know, not good. And it's like this weird dance. And a practice that I've tried to really implement is when I find out that someone has lost someone, not to use that phrase, but that someone close to them has died, I will ask for the person's name, because sometimes people will say, "My brother died last year," and just ask like, "Oh, what was your brother's name?" And then ask if they're comfortable, like, what's some of the attributes that you miss about them? Or and I actually saw it on TikTok. This woman said that someone did that to her, and it changed her relationship to asking about death. And I'm trying to implement that myself, because yeah, it's really sad when it's just silent and everyone just waits for the moment to pass. And I think it can be so beautiful just to be like, if you're comfortable, I would like to hear. And also give them the room to say, like, I kind of don't want to talk about that right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I get
But
what people are
asking
doing.
the name, that is such a good idea. So
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And I get that people are trying to relay, like, oh, I've been in that pain too. I lost a dog. They're trying to like mimic.
Relate.
Yeah, they're trying to be like, I've been heartbroken too. But ask and say, do you have the space to hear about my dog? And I will say, me and my friends, I think just because of the nature of like the awareness of mental health, we always check in with each other if we're having a bad day and ask, hey, do you have space for me to share about this? As opposed to just assuming everyone has emotional space all the time. So
Yeah.
I do think things are getting better in terms of awareness around other people's emotional space. That's a long little hike I took you on to get that point.
I followed you. I know that hike. I know that walk.
Yeah.
You know, it's less common, not that it doesn't happen, but it's less common when a human dies to go, go up and go, oh yeah, well my brother died 2 years ago, and go into that. But I think people think it's more, there are people that would do that, sadly, But I think it's probably more acceptable for someone to go, yeah, my dog died. When my dog died, blah, 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 blah. To go into the details of that death. If you were like, well, my dog died, it helped me when people ask if I had any memories I wanted to share about my dog. Would you like to do that? In that case, it might be helpful. Mm-hmm. But we're learning. We're klutzy.
Yeah.
Our culture is klutzy around death. We do. We want to push it in the closet, just like we want to put ageism and people aging in the closet. You know, if you can't get cosmetic surgery, we don't want to look at you, or,
right.
You know, that kind of stuff. We don't want to just see what life has been, mm-hmm. or see what the experience of death is about.
If it's okay with you, I would love to give Mercy, Goodness, sorry, Mercy, give Goodness kind of a moment of silent gratitude. And we can both just, thank her for her time with us. And then we can, look up pet peeves. But I think this was a great talk. So yeah, if you're open to that.
Of course.
I would love to, just remember her. I met her only briefly. Mm-hmm. But
that's okay. I caught you in here with her in your arms. I caught you that night.
No, I love a good dog go.
We'll do that. Mercy will do it with us.
Okay.
And I'll now speak for Goodness, which I do. Hi, Mom. Thanks a lot. I really like it that y'all are thinking about me. I'm up here in dog heaven with Pookie and Dancer and BB and Zorro and Dab and Amber and Gavroche. It's really nice. I think about you all the time. Tell Matt thanks. I miss him too. He was really nice. Love you, Goodness.
Yeah, it's powerful how far a life reverberates, and for Goodness to know on some level that we're still thinking about her and have stopped in our day and even made a small recording. I think we don't realize just how powerful our lives are. And we affect people just way down the line in massive, massive ways.
It's one of the gifts that dogs give us. She was a gift-giving dog, too. She was. It helps me so much to give my dogs voices. Well, they all have the same voice pretty much, but there's some changes, but I give them voices while they're alive. I speak for them. I've done that for a long time. But after they die, I speak for them. I haven't done that with humans, even though I go to a place. I imagine what the human is saying, but I don't speak for them like I do my dogs, but I actually end up having conversations with my dogs, and it really helps me. I like just knowing how absolutely happy Goodness is. And she's also with puppies, and she was a backyard breeder and had been abused as a backyard breeder, bred over and over in a backyard, and then her puppies would be taken away, and then she'd be impregnated again. And Bill and I always felt so sorry for her that she didn't get to raise her puppies. And that's that suck bone we felt like was like her puppy. And but she's with her with puppies now. And, you know, maybe those puppies are still alive, but in dog heaven, she's got some of her puppies with her. Probably some of them died. And she's just very, very happy. And I don't know if you know this, but in dog heaven, puppies stay forever puppies.
Yes, I'm familiar. Yes. It's a well-known fact.
Okay, yeah, well done. And she's just up there, and Dancer and Pookie are really enjoying it because they didn't have puppies. They were spayed. So, you know, they're being with the puppies too. So and she and Dancer and Pookie, they're pals. Very happy together. And so it's just this wonderful thing, and it gives me this idea that, you know, as I think a lot of people, I've read and seen books and stuff where people imagine their dogs greeting them when they die, and well, that may happen. What I imagine more these days, and I've talked and written about it, is that, for example, when I have the surgery in 2 days and I'm under anesthesia for 2 hours, I will, I fully expect to be with my dogs. My pack's going to be there, man. They're just going to be waiting, and we're just going to spend some time together. We're going to run around a little bit, have some fun.
I love that.
So that it helps me look forward to it. When I'm in that liminal space.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for talking with me, being on the podcast. I'll send you a link. And yeah, I'm really excited that we got to do this, and that, you know, you get to come to my side of things with making some media and sharing your insights and your writing. And I want to add this, that I have just felt so like blessed and grateful to have you as a close friend, but also as an artist. And I was able to read your book, and, you know, I was close to some of those stories. Some of them took place in PS1 charter school, which was a surreal experience to be like, I was there. I'm not in the story, but I was on the other side of that wall. And then to read the manuscript, which there was some shared realities between, like, some of the stories with Pookie, or in Being Mean, like, there was some overlap, and I was like, whoa, this is like a deeper cut of this other chapter.
Good.
So to go in between, because I didn't finish Being Mean before I started the manuscript, so I was like, whoa. And, like, I hope everyone could experience, like, a deep friendship, but then spending time with that friend, with their art separately, and then being able to come and talk to them. It's been really fulfilling for me. So I just wanted to share that.
You're so good with this. You facilitate diving deep because you do so yourself.
Yes.
Your willingness to do it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I so love that you're it's always meaningful to me when somebody reads my work. That's why I wrote it. I mean, I wrote it for my own healing, but I really hoped that others would read it and learn something and feel something.
Yeah. Well, I still have people that haven't seen my pilot, and I'm like, it's 26 minutes long. You can't find 26 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we're going to watch that again.
Yes.
And is there any way you can put it on the TV?